Welcome to Catching Up with Council. I'm your host, Leah Longbreak. Today we're catching up with Ward 3 Councilman Kerry McCormack. Welcome, Councilman. So good to see you.
You too.
Great to
Thank
have
you
you
so
in
much for having
studio.
me.
It's our pleasure to have you here. It's been a while, actually, since we've seen you here. For our viewers, start off by telling us a little bit about yourself and where you grew up.
Absolutely. So I grew up in the North Collinwood neighborhood, which I know that you know is a wonderful place to live.
Yes, resident.
Absolutely. I grew up off a street off of Lakeshore Boulevard, went to Villangel St. Joseph High School on East 185th Street. So I grew up riding my bike around, Lakeshore and Euclid and all the parks in the area, and going to Mickey's and Sandy's and all that good stuff in North Collinwood. And from there went down to Miami University.
And now you're in Ohio City. So
Yes.
tell us about that transition.
Sure. So after I graduated from Miami, I wanted to experience a different place and a different culture. So I moved to Madrid, Spain. And I worked in the school system in Madrid, and I taught first and second grade English. So I had, going into it, had no idea what it took to be a teacher, and came out of that with a brand new appreciation for how hard teachers work and how difficult that career is, but also a rewarding one. And it's one of those things where people kind of don't understand that until they do it,
right?
But loved it. And so I had my first and second graders over there teaching English. Moved home back to Cleveland, and I moved to Ohio City and began working for Ohio City Incorporated in local community organizing. So we did things like starting up the rec league with Near West Recreation, worked on some proactive safety programs and all sorts of different things in the neighborhood. Rented a house, a little apartment, cheap little apartment when I first moved home. Was fortunate enough, I bought my first townhouse in the neighborhood, and now I'm on my third place in Ohio City, and the last one, they're gonna have to carry me out feet first out of that place because I'm not moving. So
yeah. Being in Madrid, Spain, obviously you learned to speak Spanish, and I think you studied it in college as well.
Yes,
right?
yes.
You're one of only a few that can speak Spanish in
Somos
council.
dos concejales que hablan español en el concejal, sí. There's two of us that speak Spanish in council, I believe.
You and Councilwoman Santana?
Councilman Santana, that's
yeah,
right.
Wow.
Yeah.
So your wards. Downtown obviously is a big part of it, but what else is comprised of Ward 3?
So I go from East 40th and Lakeside, cutting down the north side of Lakeside, essentially all the way down to Storer Avenue. So I have this big ward that goes from downtown to the near west side of the city of Cleveland. So I've got all of the central business district in downtown, all three sports teams, the Catholic Diocese, the Port, the Flats, Ohio City, Tremont, and the Stockyards neighborhood, part of the Stockyards neighborhood, which I share with council people, Santana and Zone, and partially Brancatelli as well. So I've got a great diverse ward with different neighborhoods in it. I got a little bit of everything, right?
You do,
so,
yeah.
I can go from a meeting with a business in downtown to a meeting with, seniors talking about housing assistance in the same day. So it's really exciting.
Downtown is one of the fastest growing neighborhoods. So what do you attribute to that growth?
Sure. So I think a couple things. Nationally we see that folks are moving closer into the cities. They don't want the longer commute. They want to be closer to the action. They want to be able to take a bus to work or walk to work. And just be closer, really. And so I think it's a national trend, but in Cleveland, there's been a ton of intentional coordination of folks in the greater Cleveland community to make sure that downtown continues to be a great neighborhood. So historic renovation of our underutilized buildings downtown. If you look at enhancements in the quality of life for folks downtown, the Downtown Cleveland Alliance and the ambassadors, parks like our beautiful public square, thinking of things like the malls, Perk, all these different places that are available downtown. So it's a great place to live. And quite frankly, if you're working downtown, what a better way to get to your job than on foot. Yeah. No traffic, no headache. It's always the same commute every day.
Save cost.
Save cost, absolutely. Yeah. So it's a great, vibrant neighborhood that I've got 20,000 people living there in downtown Cleveland now. So, traditionally when we thought of downtown, we may just think of, that's the places where people go to work, or I go to a baseball game, or I go for whatever reason. Yeah. But, downtown is the home of 20,000 people, right? And so those are City of Cleveland residents that love our community and spend time in our parks and our schools. And so it's been really exciting to see the vibrancy of downtown really help to create a more robust neighborhood.
What else is needed to help make it truly become a neighborhood?
Yeah, so one of the big initiatives that we have right now is to bring more playgrounds to downtown Cleveland. I was actually, right when I started council, I've been on council for 3 years now, a resident, a mother that lives downtown raised her hand and she said, Councilman, she said, you represent Ohio City downtown and Stockyards as well. I said, yes. And she said, how many people live in Ohio City? I said, around 10,000 people. She said, well, how many playgrounds are in Ohio City? And I said, okay, well, parks and playgrounds, Market Square Park and Greenwood and Fairview, and, kind of thinking about, in Stockyards in my ward, Roberto Clemente and Tremont's got, Lincoln Park and different pocket parks. And, and so I started to think about all the different parks. She said, okay. She said, how many people live in downtown Cleveland? I said, well, we're getting near 20,000. She said, how many public playgrounds are there? So I took that point, right away.
Yeah.
And it was exciting for me because it showed that, our downtown residents are of all different backgrounds and they care about their community, their neighborhood, and the quality of life within their neighborhood. And so from that initial conversation, we partnered with Downtown Cleveland Alliance, our Downtown Cleveland Residents Association, and others, and we're now on track. I think we've got 2 playgrounds coming online in the next year.
Oh, wow.
One will be more of a traditional playground. The other is more of a playscape, which is kind of interesting. But that really points to the fact that folks are staying in our downtown neighborhood. It's not a place,
Once you have a kid, you move out.
Right.
Yeah.
No, we have a growing amount of families staying in downtown. We've got young people, of course, as well, and empty nesters. But our families are saying this is a place that we want to live, and we want to not only accommodate them today, but we want to put the building blocks forward so that the next 1, 5, 10, 20 years, people really see downtown as a place for everybody.
Yeah.
Whether you're, again, an empty nester, a young person, family, anywhere in between, you're welcome in this community, and it's a thriving neighborhood.
You talked about the parks, and I was actually going to ask you, I know there's different parks that you are working on both restoring, revitalizing, and looking to build. So if you can touch a little bit more on that.
Yeah, for sure. So I'll just say from my time living in Madrid especially, it's such a dense and populated community. They focus so heavily on their public spaces because most folks in Madrid, for example, live in apartments. And so they really, really emphasize their public green space. So through that experience and my experience growing up, it really taught me how important quality public green space is. So and that's such an important part for people that are living in urban communities. So, Public Square, obviously, that is a big example of a park that has been redone recently that, interesting on Public Square, it's everyone's front door, right, for the entire city and the region, but it's also the park for our neighborhood residents downtown, right? Yeah. So that truly is a mixed-use park. But that's been a huge one. If you look in other neighborhoods in the city, in my ward, some exciting ones, I would say, Greenwood in Ohio City is getting almost $1 million renovation with a brand new pool and pool deck. It's already had the renovation on the park and the playscape and the basketball courts. And, Clark Field, and I can't mention Clark Field without mentioning the Friends of Clark Field, who have been a long-time advocacy group in our Tremont neighborhood, who have really pushed to keep that park and to renovate it and to get it in great shape. And what's exciting about that is right now the EPA is going and they're doing some remediation work, which I think that by the end of the year they'll be finished with that, and over $2 million brand new park will go in for the Tremont neighborhood in Clark Field. So there's a lot of capital being invested in parks in our neighborhoods. And again, we think about parks, the great thing about them, like a library, they're public and they're for everybody, right? So no matter who you are, no matter how much money you have, it makes no difference. Our parks should be high quality and they're accessible for everybody. And the last thing I'll say about that too is what we find is that not only is it accessible to everybody, but it's a space for people of different backgrounds to get together and get to know each other. So, you may be in Fairview Park in Ohio City at a T-ball game or at a soccer game, and you'll have a family who just, immigrated from Ethiopia or from Uganda, standing next to, a couple that moved from New York, standing next to folks that have lived in the neighborhood for 40 years. And what's really neat about that is it creates an environment for those folks to get to know each other, for those folks to build community, right? Because it's not just enough to say, hey, we're excited that we have a diverse community. We've got to provide quality spaces and opportunities for those folks to get together and to meet each other and to break down barriers.
Absolutely. Now, aside from parks, you have a
Yeah.
lot of wonderful schools in your ward.
Yes.
But one school in particular, the Montessori School in Tremont,
Yes.
there's talk about it moving. So where are we at
Right.
with this right now?
Yeah, so Tremont Montessori, which for folks in the neighborhood, they know that this is not new news, right? There's been conversation for years about the school closing. Let me just say this. We are, as a community, 100% adamantly opposed to that school being closed or moved to another location. If Tremont Montessori is closed, we will have 0 CMSD presence within the central Tremont neighborhood. 0. No public schools. And to me, if we look at Tremont, it's had a 35% increase in young people between the ages of 25 and 35. It's had a 55% increase in children under the age of 5. It's a growing neighborhood in the city of Cleveland. We cannot, as a community, claim that we have a successful growing neighborhood, that we're excited about our successful growing neighborhoods without high quality public options for those families. We need a public school in Tremont. And so our neighborhood and our community has mobilized to ensure that the district and the city and everyone that will listen to us understands that that school, in one form or another, it's important that it is in our central Tremont neighborhood and that it stays there. And so the school district actually has kind of postponed a decision to the fall. We had more Tremont residents participate in the feedback and attend the meetings than any neighborhood in the city. So I'm proud of our residents in Tremont. But the message was loud and clear. And that message is that we are happy to work with the district and with anyone else on what does that curriculum look like? What's the best for the neighborhood? You know, what does that school look like? Whether it's a new school, renovation, I think a lot of the conversations are on a new school. Right. But fundamentally, we must have a public school in Tremont, and we will fight to the very end to make sure that that happens. And I think that that message has been heard loud and clear in the district, in the city. You know, I've spoken directly with our mayor, Mayor Jackson, expressed that to him as well, how important it is to the community that we have high quality public school in Tremont.
And hopefully, I mean, it's a historical building, it's beautiful, and hopefully the school can stay there.
That's right.
What about the other schools in your ward?
Yeah.
Anything coming up with them?
Yeah, sure. So we've had a lot of, in kind of moving through the ward, in Ohio City, we have 2 new schools, which is exciting, 2 new public schools in Dunbar and in Orchard. And what's been really exciting about those 2 schools is they, had been demolished and, rebuilt, and they're really getting their legs underneath them. So, thinking about Dunbar, I think they're now ready to be, which is, a big increase from what they used to be, and with, they're a community school. So their enrollment is way up. They've got a great principal. Their folks are in the community. They partner with our neighborhood, with St. Ignatius High School, on different tutoring opportunities and other arts and cultural amenities. So that school is really blossoming. Same thing with Orchard. Yeah. Every year I attend the Father's Walk with the folks from Orchard, and their principal, she is just so dynamic. I think she's in her 30s. And it's great to see CMSD bring in this young leadership, and they're, I'm so proud of our schools because not only are they improving and excelling in our communities, but they're also really taking to heart the neighborhood characteristics of community service and getting to know your neighbors that Ohio City and Tremont on the near west side has championed for decades. So yes. I'm really proud of our public schools on the near west side. They're doing really well. I also thinking about the new near West Side High School. Now that's technically in Councilman Zone's ward, just over the line.
But your neighbors.
It's our neighbor, right? And and we've worked for over a year, really almost 2 years, on that new school. What is that curriculum going to look like? What is the design going to look like and feature, and how does that accommodate our community? And so it's been really exciting to see our public schools on the near west side. Campus International, not my ward again, but a lot of my residents go there. Another wonderful public school option. And so, ensuring that our schools in Cleveland are performing well, that our kids are safe and thriving, is one of the most important, if not the most important element to the revitalization of the city of Cleveland. And I'll also tell you that one thing I'm really excited about too is the partnerships in which our schools are taking. So if you look at, and again, not my ward and Councilman Santana's ward, but if you look at Lincoln West and their partnership with Metro Health, if you look at Campus International and their partnership with Cleveland State, one of the things that's really exciting is we're seeing that, hey, look, we've got all these great amenities in Cleveland. We've got all these great opportunities, institutions and arts organizations and hospitals. How do we pair our public school system up with those institutions so that we can take those resources, We can take those folks that are brilliant in their field and meld them into our school system so that our children have the exposure and opportunity that they deserve from the amenities and the institutions that are in our community.
And partnership helps everyone thrive.
That's exactly
right. You can't
right.
do it alone.
100% of the students in the graduating class at the Metro Health Lincoln West campus were accepted into college, 100%.
That is wonderful.
So that just shows you, though, how we can't look at our schools in a silo, right? We've got to say, how do we wrap around our students, not only from a social service element, which is huge, but also from an opportunity perspective. You know, making sure that our major institutions are directly involved with education of our children.
Well, we have so much more to dive into, but we need to take a quick break.
Absolutely.
So don't change that channel. We'll be right back with more Catching Up with Council.
Downtown Cleveland.
Downtown Cleveland.
Who is Downtown Cleveland for?
Downtown Cleveland.
Downtown Cleveland is it's for the early risers.
It's about being open for business.
It's for people who enjoy a quick commute.
I mean, my door is like just near side of Pickwick.
It's for people who want to get in on the ground floor. I do, I love it. It's really convenient for somebody who's young and very busy.
Downtown Cleveland.
It's for the 900 dogs living down here.
Downtown Cleveland. It's for the pioneers.
When we first opened, we were still both a little nervous, but it's been amazing. Like, far better than anyone projected. It's been awesome.
Downtown Cleveland. It's for the innovative.
It's for the creative.
For people who want a unique workplace.
It's for people who love the sound of progress.
It's for people who want to see the lake every day.
It's for people who want to escape.
Downtown is where the master chefs come to you.
With over 70 restaurants and cafes downtown.
The culinary options in Cleveland are insane.
Downtown Cleveland is
It's for people who are on the go.
And people who look forward to seeing a smiling face.
Impromptu meetings on the street by the thousands.
How are you?
It's for people who are in the business of making connections.
It's for the people who share value, community, investment, sustainability.
It's for people with big ideas.
For people with a bright future.
Downtown Cleveland. For people who wear their pride on their sleeve. There is every reason to love Cleveland.
With over 8 million visitors downtown each year.
To be enjoyed with friends.
Over 1,500 performances, over 1 million guests coming to Playhouse Square each year. It's for the people who can't wait for the curtain to rise.
It's for people who want to see something they've never seen before.
Downtown Cleveland.
Is it for you?
Downtown Cleveland. Is it for you?
Is it for you?
If you're looking for something real.
Is it for you?
Maybe it's for you.
Is it for you? Get down here right now.
Downtown Cleveland. Is it for you?
Welcome back to Catching Up with Council. I'm your host, Leah Longbreak. Today, we're catching up with Ward 3 Councilman Kerry McCormack. Welcome back, Councilman.
Thank you.
So, Stockyard neighborhood is part of your ward, and there's been a lot of demolitions happening lately.
Yeah.
Can you tell us more about that, as well as the additional initiatives that's happening?
Sure. So let me just say that I'm really excited about not only the Stockyard neighborhood, but the Clark-Fulton area in general. And I think this is one of the areas of the city that has the most potential for growth, which is a really wonderful thing. And I'll just say that, you know, it's been a pleasure partnering with my teammate, Councilwoman Santana, in the Stockyards and Clark-Fulton neighborhood to get this work done. And she's been an incredible leader in the community to ensure that not only we see progress and investment in the neighborhood, but that it's also centered around our residents. So, so I'll just, the neighborhood, I think there's been a feeling in the neighborhood, I'm going to be honest with you, for a while that, you know, folks have said that, you know, we feel overlooked. And what's been exciting to see over the past few years and moving forward is there's real tangible action happening in the neighborhood. So I'll give you a couple examples. Over 60 brand new affordable homes have been built or are under construction in the Stockyards, International Village, and La Villa Hispana districts. So those are brand new construction homes that are being built on areas where there used to be homes. We know that there's been a lot of demolition, rightfully so, in the past. And so it's been exciting to see that new housing development come forward to help revitalize the Stockyards, Clark Fulton part of our community, and doing so in a conscientious way, meaning that those homes are accessible to folks that don't make a ton of money or that may not be able to afford a new construction otherwise. And so ensuring that as we grow in a place like Stockyard, because with the Metro Health transformation, there's no doubt in my mind that we're going to see economic development and growth in the community. But on the front end, we got to make sure that there's affordable housing options for folks in the neighborhood. So it's been exciting to see that happen. So those new homes are being built. We continue to see strategic demolition in the Stockyards, Clark Fulton neighborhood. Nobody wants to live by a house that's fallen down or that's got bad negative activity, criminal activity in it. So making sure that the homes that are condemned and that are providing no positive public purpose for our community are taken down. I was just on West 48th Street south of Clark a couple days ago meeting with a group of our residents, and we had a house that had burned down. Unfortunately, it was sitting. And we partnered with the mayor's administration to get a couple houses taken down, and just the perception of the street has improved so much just by getting some of that blight out of the way. So, those types of strategic demolition are really important, but ensuring that we have positive growth happening too with those new single-family homes being built is really exciting too. Another big one on West 65th, which our neighborhood in Stockyards, it's kind of infamous, so there's no need to explain it to them, but we had the Bell Tire and the Swift building, which is about 65th and Store, and those had been blighted and vacant and falling apart, quite frankly, for decades. And I remember I did a site visit with the building and housing director and some other folks from the city probably 2 years ago. And we were, looking at the buildings, and the bricks were crumbling on the streets, and it was just bad news. And this lady drove by, I assume being a neighborhood resident, in her car and said, "Tear those things down!" Yelled it to the group. So, put an exclamation point on the need there. But we were able to secure, working with the mayor's administration, we were able to secure millions of dollars to have those buildings removed and remediated. And what's so cool about that is that already we have the Barrio Commissary there. They're already expanding onto one of those lots, which will create new jobs and opportunities. So that's one of the lots that were taken down. And then we've got another great parcel that we're going to be working with economic development and other folks to ensure that we have, we're growing our job base there. There's something like, I think it's like 5,000 manufacturing or food processing jobs within a mile of Max Hayes. And Max Hayes, is preparing our students and our young people to plug into those jobs, which can be high quality jobs. Yeah. So what we have to ensure is that when we demolish a site like 65th and Store, that we have a vision and a plan to say, we're not only going to demolish this and seed it, which gets rid of the nuisance, which is what the neighborhood's very happy about, but we've got a plan. We've got to make sure that that 65th remains a corridor for high quality jobs that people can access. And that's one of the most important things that we talk about here in the city of Cleveland. I can build a factory 45 minutes out of the city, but how the heck is anybody going to get there? Right? So when you put jobs in the city core that are accessible via public transportation, that are easy to get to, you can ride your bike to if you live in the neighborhood, those create opportunities for our neighborhood residents to access those high quality jobs. So we're excited about the expansion of Barrio. I also want to mention, growing up with my little brother who's disabled in my household, he's a beautiful, beautiful child and now an adult. But I know firsthand how difficult it is. And even though those folks bring so much joy to your life, there's a lot of challenges when you have a disabled relative or friend in your home or in your life. And what I'm so proud about that commissary on West 65th is they work with the Cuyahoga County Department of Developmental Disabilities to bring in folks who have disabilities to be employed there and get gainful employment. So those are the types of opportunities that we need to encourage and that we need to support in Cleveland. I'm excited that they're going to be expanding onto one of the sites where we demolished one of those blighted buildings. And we're going to be looking on the larger site to bring in another type of either food processing or advanced manufacturing to take up that site, to create jobs for the community and more economic vitality for the community.
Fantastic. Aside from Stockyard, Ohio City has had a lot of apartments and homes built recently and surrounding the area.
Yeah.
How are you working to ensure that it's not being gentrified, that people of all incomes can afford these homes?
Yeah, sure. And let me just start by saying, when we think about a balanced economic development growth and balanced housing growth, to me, that is not just an issue of checking a box. That's not just an issue of saying, let me pat myself on the back, we got some affordable housing. I fundamentally believe that if our neighborhoods are going to be successful in the long term, that they have to be economically diverse. So it's not only the right thing to do, but it's also about creating city neighborhoods that have longevity, that have the ability to be successful for a long period of time. So I think it's the right thing to do for people that need access to affordable housing, but it's also the right thing on a macro scale to do for the city of Cleveland and our well-being in the long term. So to answer your question directly, about 2.5 years ago, maybe 2 years ago, something like that, I saw a lot of our land bank lots in the neighborhood being bought up for private market rate development, which, by the way, we welcome.
Right.
We're a neighborhood that used to have 28,000 people. We've got 10,000. We're a city that used to have 1 million people. We're around 400,000. We've got to grow. Right. We've got to grow as a city. We've got to be a city that welcomes in new people fundamentally. So we welcome the new housing developments, new single-family homes and otherwise into our neighborhood. But what we knew is that we were saying that these were city lots that were selling for $200, and they were going for market rate development. Again, wonderful. We welcome the growth in our community. But from a good government policy perspective, we thought, wait a second. If a lot over here is selling for $50,000, a private lot, right? And our city lot, we're selling for $200. Wait a second, what's going on here? So what I did is we held, I think we've got about 45 lots that we held and said, we've got to come up with a plan to ensure that we can build affordable housing on these lots. So in addition to the other development that was market rate that was going on, that we're infusing affordable housing into that. So really exciting recently, and I think we're going to be doing some breaking news here, but we are going to be launching the Near West housing, I was going to say trust fund, but that's the dollar, I lost it. But anyways, it's the ability for us, I'm going to come up with it in a minute. What is it? Land Trust, I'm sorry, the Near West Land Trust. And what that does is it allows us to build housing on these lots that remain permanently affordable. And those houses will be accessible to folks that make 50 to 80% AMI. So like, what the heck does that mean, AMI? It's area median income, and what that means is that for a household of 1 to 2 people, about $40,000 or under, those homes will be accessible for those folks. So we will have high quality new housing being built on the Near West Side that is affordable housing that will remain permanently affordable for folks. And the other great thing about it is that they'll have home ownership. So these folks will be coming in and they'll be able to purchase the home at a very affordable monthly rate, and they'll be able to build wealth as they pay into that home. So it's not, they're able to invest in themselves. Yeah. So really excited about that. Those homes will be coming up in Ohio City and Tremont within the next year. We should have a groundbreaking, hopefully by the, knock on some wood, by the end of the year.
There.
You better be there. You better be there. So, but that's really exciting. So that's to the infill part, right? That's making sure that when we're building new homes, that some of those homes that are built, and I think we have about 45 lots that will be in this program, are accessible to folks that may not be able to afford market rate. The other side of things too is one of the things that I learned very, very early on is that there are certain things that you can do on a project basis, like our affordable infill. There are other things that you have to look at from a broader policy perspective. And I know that sometimes when you hear policy, you're like, oh my gosh, does that ever lead to anything? Is it like a think tank that just drinks expensive coffee and talks to each other all day? So one of the things that we came up, we said, we got to come up with a different policy for housing in Cleveland. And we can't do one that we just sit around and talk to each other for 2 years. We got to make sure that it's done well, but that we're actually going to have some achievements at the end of the day. So we brought in a few council people. So Councilman Zone, Cleveland, Griffin, myself, and others are involved in this initiative. We brought in our housing experts from Cleveland that are experts in affordable housing. And I'll tell you, one day I was sitting in my office kind of banging my head against the wall of how do we ensure that we have more affordable housing in our community? And it hit me, wait a second. There are affordable housing experts in this community, in this city. You don't have to be one.
Right.
There are people that do this for their job, right? And so we brought in folks like Enterprise Community Partners, Neighborhood Housing Services of Greater Cleveland, Cleveland Housing Network, and others, our Community Development Corporation community, and it's expanded since then to say, help us come up with a new policy that's going to increase the amount of affordable housing we see in Cleveland. We don't want to see market rate housing development stop. Right? Because we know that we want to have a balanced growth, but we know that we need to see more affordable housing development in our neighborhoods. So what we've done is we've launched first there will be an analysis of our housing market so that we're working with data and facts. So the Cleveland Foundation funded a analysis of all of our, not only our neighborhoods, but best practices from across the country of what they're doing to ensure that they have more affordable housing growth. From there, because again, we want to make sure that we're working with data and facts. I got feelings, right, of how I feel things should happen, and those are important, right, because they reflect your lived experience. But we got to make sure that we're working off of hard numbers and data. That's where the best policy is going to come from. So when we get that study, we're going to be working to implement new policy in Cleveland to incentivize more affordable housing growth while also taking a look at our current housing initiatives and our current housing economic policy to make sure it makes sense. So thinking about things like our tax abatement, thinking about those types of things, making sure that those still make sense in the context of 2019. Last thing I'll say on that is that I'm really excited about is that we're also looking at loop legislation. So this is long-term owner-occupant protection policy, something like that. They've got it in Philadelphia. And essentially what it does is it says, hey, if you're a long-term owner-occupant of your home and you qualify economically, and a lot of senior citizens do, that we're going to cap your tax increases as a neighborhood grows. And why is that important? We want neighborhoods in Cleveland that are economically distressed to grow. We want, vacant homes that need to be torn down. We want to welcome new folks into our neighborhoods, but we want to ensure that the folks that have been in our neighborhoods for 10, 20, 30, 40 years, that have lived through some of those challenging times, they may be excited that there's, that home next door that was blighted and causing them all sorts of headaches was taken down.
Yeah.
They may be excited that new folks moved in, but what happens when the unintended consequences of the county really reappraising the neighborhood and those taxes go up? And if I'm a senior and I'm on Social Security and I've got my budget set and all of a sudden my taxes have gone up like that, that's a big problem.
Absolutely.
And the last thing that we want to see in our neighborhoods in Cleveland is that our seniors or otherwise have to leave because they can't afford the housing. So what the loop legislation does and has done successfully in other places is it caps that tax increase for those that are in our vulnerable in our community, for example, like long-term homeowners that are seniors, so that they can enjoy the progress and growth of their neighborhood without having to be priced out.
Pushed out, yeah.
That's exactly right.
So you started to mention the city's tax abatement. The study on it and how it deals with housing equity, what are your thoughts on the issue and what is the timeline on this?
Yeah, so we hope to have so right now what we're doing is we're in the research stage and we're starting the community outreach stage. So this month we'll be starting to reach out to residents, impacted groups, and of course developers, right? Because we want everybody's perspective.
Right.
And we're going to be really doing focus groups and community meetings to get residents' feedback. Because here's the thing. As I mentioned earlier, do we want to have data? Absolutely. Do we want to have economic statistics? Absolutely. But also, we can't devalue the perspective of the woman on Scranton Road who came up to me crying in a block club because her tax increase were going to price her out of her home. Her opinion and her lived experience is just as valuable as data on a piece of paper.
Absolutely.
So what we're rolling into now is that community outreach and that engagement with our neighborhood residents. And by the end of the year, we hope to have some idea of where we're heading with that. So the timeline would be hopefully the end of this year. We have some good recommendations of where we can take policy.
So kind of a hot topic is the scooters.
Yeah,
and it's a pilot program based really in your ward.
Sure.
So tell us about where we're going with this right now and your true feelings on it.
Yeah, definitely. So I was the author of the legislation. But here's what let me start from a little bit of a bigger perspective and we'll work down into the specifics on this. There are some things that we can look at other cities and say, they implemented this or that and it worked or it didn't work. And this is one of those things. And I will just say that when you look at, thinking about our downtown, near east, near west neighborhoods, but neighborhoods across the city, what are other cities doing to create vibrant and exciting places to live, to work, and to visit? And I think we can look around the country and learn from that. Because here's the thing, Cleveland, a born and raised city kid. I love the city of Cleveland. We've got some of the best amenities here in Cleveland.
Absolutely.
Probably more amenities under one roof than any other city, or competes in the top of that, right? Yeah. So you think about our arts and culture, our 2 waterfronts, our historic neighborhoods, our food, our ethnic communities, our sports teams, you name it, you go on the list. We know, we talk about this in Cleveland, about our great amenities that we have here. But one of the things we have to make sure that we're doing is that we're maximizing that potential. We're maximizing encouraging the growth and the access to those amenities and that potential. And so in Cleveland, we got to make sure that we're thinking in a forward direction about where our city's going so that we can grow our population, that we can create more jobs, and that we can thrive. So one of the things, if you look around us in different cities in America that they're doing, is they're saying, hey, look, we know that folks still get around in cars. Of course, I do. You may as well. I'm got a car, I take transit, and I bike, right? But a lot of people still take cars. We know that, right? Yeah. This is not by any means an attack against drivers. Sometimes. But we've got to think about what are the things that have been successful in a balanced way of getting people around town. So we think about things like public transportation. How do we support public transportation? Because we know that not only people rely on it, but people want to use it, right? How do we create a better public transportation system? But also, another part of that is how do we create different options for mobility to get around town? So people on bikes, people on scooters, and how do we do that in a safe manner?
Safely.
Exactly. So one of the things that we're looking at is how do we move Cleveland into the future? How do we create a Cleveland that not only allows you to get around in a car, but allows you to get around on a bike safely, that allows you to take a bus safely and efficiently? And so other cities have been very successful in this, and what they have found is the more that they've embraced different ways to get around, whether that be a bike or a bus or a scooter or a car, they've seen incredible economic success and a lot of positive results from it. So let me give you a quick example, because sometimes people think, oh, okay, well, is that a New York and San Francisco thing? Right. Look at Indianapolis. So in Indianapolis, they still get snow, they still get winter, they get all that.
They share our weather.
They share our weather. They had a bold initiative called the Indianapolis Cultural Trail. And what that is it's throughout the entire city, and it's a buffered path where you can ride a bike, and buffered meaning there's a barrier between the cars and the path. And you can ride a bike on it, you can take a scooter on it, you can jog on it. They put beautiful landscaping, and they used it to connect different parts of their city. And if you look at what happened when they did that, businesses opened along that, they wanted to be on it. Companies relocated their headquarters, bringing jobs into their city, they wanted to be on it. There became an excitement and a vibrancy when people thought, there is a different way that I can look at my city. There's a different way that I can get around my city. There's a way that I can do it safely on a bike or on foot that doesn't require me to cross a 7-lane road with cars roaring by and speeding and all that kind of stuff. Right. And they've seen an incredible amount of economic vitality build up around that cultural trail. That's the idea that we want to bring to Cleveland. How can we encourage different ways to get around our city and safe infrastructure that allow cars and people on different types of mobility to exist in peace? Right? How do we do that? So whether you're visiting town, you're coming for our great attractions, and you want to go to an Indians game and see the Rock Hall, and then see a show at Kerry House, and then you want to go down to La Placita and Clark Fulton. Yeah. Can you access those things without a car, or reducing your amount of car? Or if you live in the St. Clair Superior neighborhood and you're trying to get to your job at Key Bank, or you're trying to get to your job at Progressive Field, can you take a bike and safely get there and not need to get in a car or a taxi or anything like that? So that's the idea. How do we bring different forms of getting around town, different forms of mobility to Cleveland, and how do we also create infrastructure that allows for folks to get around safely? One fact that I hear a lot that is alarming, it's crazy actually, the average cost of owning and operating a car, how much do you think that is a year? So you're thinking car payment, insurance, gas, all that.
Yeah,
what is it?
Oh, I should know this since I have to spend all of it, but
it's almost $9,000 a year. Yeah. $9,000 to own and operate a vehicle. almost $9,000 on average, $9,000 a year. So if we think about, if we can create a Cleveland that is looking into the future, that is embracing a more balanced way of thinking about getting from A to B, helps the environment, it's lower cost. So we think about it living affordably, right? If you don't have to pay that $9,000 a year, but you've got to pay, $150 for a bike, maybe a little bit of maintenance here or there, that's a huge cost savings.
Huge cost
So
savings.
thinking about different ways to get around, thinking about better infrastructure for things like bikes, scooters, and buses is not only a conversation around economic vitality, it's also a conversation around equity, right? How do we empower more people to safely get from A to B and to build a better life in Cleveland?
And so where are we at with creating the safety?
So we passed a piece of legislation out of council that will allow for things like scooters and electric bikes to come back to Cleveland. Now what's important to note is that in allowing them to come back to Cleveland, we really did a lot of studying on best practices. What has and has not worked in other cities when it comes to these devices. And so we've put a lot of different stop gaps and safety measures in the bill, in the legislation, so that it says that you've got to ensure that you park it safely. You're not blocking the sidewalk or public right away. It says that you got to make sure that you ride them safely. It says that if there's a company that is misbehaving and forgetting about all the rules, we can take their permit from them, right? So it's got a lot of different measures in it that create a safe environment for people to utilize these types of devices. And where we're at now is the administration, very shortly in the next week or so, will be, I think, releasing the list of what vendors pass those minimal threshold to return to Cleveland.
Great.
So, yeah.
What about the safety factor as far as roads go?
Yeah.
Are we doing anything else currently to create more bike lanes in the city?
Yeah, really good question. Yeah. So here's one thing I want to say, including myself, it's difficult for all of us, especially in the United States, to think about, safety on the road, right? Because for decades, most of us drive cars, a lot of us drive cars, right? And so we've thought about road safety through the lens of a vehicle, through the lens of a car. So if a cyclist gets hit by a car, or if someone on a scooter gets hit by a car, the question goes, is it safe for you to ride a bike? Is it safe to be a scooter? Are these things safe? Well, wait a second. The car is the thing that hit the bike.
Right.
The car is the thing that hit the scooter.
Right.
So it's not a question of whether it's safe for you to be a cyclist. It's a question of, ensuring that we have safety for cyclists, safety for people on scooters, and that a lot of times the cars are the ones, and the people driving the cars are at fault here. And we all know that, you drive down the street, there's some crazy drivers out there, right? And so what we have to do is ensure that we're creating an opportunity for people to use things other than a car to get around safely. So to answer your question, we're right now in council, we're taking a look at our Complete and Green Streets Ordinance, which was originally passed in 2011, to see in ways that we can strengthen it, to encourage things like more multimodal transportation options and more infrastructure for bikes and scooters and things like that. So let's put an example here, though. If you are in our downtown neighborhood and you look at Superior going east from downtown Cleveland, or let's say you look at Lakeshore, the neighborhood I grew up in, right?
Yes.
There's a bike lane there, but most people drive in it.
People drive the windy road,
yeah. Wind road, right? Yeah. So, and you look at Superior, I think it's 7 lanes wide. A lot of these roads were built that wide when you had 1 million people living in the city, right? Or when we were a much more auto-centric society. Can we look at a road like Superior, and that's somewhat of a bad example because the Midway track is already planned for it, but can we look at these really wide roads and say, can we carve out space for better infrastructure for bikes and scooters and things like that, so that folks that are on those bikes can feel safe, whether they're commuting from home to work or whether they're just taking a stroll through the city, but also it's clear to drivers that this space is for folks that are on bikes and this space is for you to drive. so that we have fewer incidents and interaction between the two of them. And I know there are folks out there that get in their fancy bikes, skin tight suits and go 45 miles per hour and come in from the suburbs on their bikes, and they say, oh, Councilman, you shouldn't put bike lanes in, we should all be in the road. Well, for the 5% of them that do that, wonderful for them, they can stay in the road. But for the rest of us that are a more, your day-to-day bike riders, leisurely or day-to-day bike riders, really see benefit in safe buffered infrastructure that really says this is a space for things other than cars, right? And that's a win-win for people that are driving a car and riding a bike, because you've kind of got those distinct spaces. So we're looking at that law to see if there's ways we can strengthen it to really push and encourage more the development of more infrastructure like that.
That's great.
Because as we know, look, Lakeshore Boulevard, neighborhood I grew up in, you put a little paint on the road, and cars go woo. They ride a, I bike down Detroit Avenue a lot in the neighborhood in Ohio City where I live, and there's a painted bike lane. Cars don't care about that. They'll park in it, they'll drive in it, they'll swerve through it. So we've got to stop pretending that putting a little paint and goodwill on the road is a safe environment for cyclists. It's not.
Find a better way to do a shared space.
That's exactly right.
Yeah. So, 3 years now into being councilman.
Yeah.
What has been the best part of being a councilman?
What has been the best part of being a councilman? So, I was a community organizer before I was a council person, and I've got to tell you that my favorite thing to do is to knock doors. And I know that sounds crazy, and I some people are nervous to canvass or knock doors, but one of the things that we do is we try to carve out, especially in the summertime, Fridays, for a full day of constituent services. And so what that means is we look at our call log from the week before, and we visit the people that called us and that had an issue. And so we'll go to their home, knock on their door, and say, sir, was this issue resolved? If not, how do we set a plan to resolve it? But I love interacting with the people in our community. I love talking, even if they're upset about something, right? Even if that situation's uncomfortable, that's my favorite part of my job. Is getting involved, and again, prior to being on council, I went to all 8 and 9 block clubs in Ohio City every month. So I've grown up in community engagement. Yeah. But that when you knock on someone's door, that's when you're going to get the real deal. You're going to hear from someone about what they're happy about in the neighborhood. You're going to hear from someone about what they're concerned about, and they're going to tell you that they do tell us the truth. Trust me, if you ask other council people. So I love that though, because people have goodwill in our community. They want what's best for our community. And even if they look at me and say, Councilman, I disagree with you on this issue, I know that they're passionate about that issue because they care about our neighborhoods. So I love that person-to-person interaction. It's my favorite part. I could, all of the minutia of whether it's City Hall or politics, I could do without. But you put me in a room with a group of senior citizens talking about how we create better tax policy, or a group of residents who want to learn about how to get low-income seniors talking about housing assistance, and we do it in Spanish. Those are the types of human-to-human interactions that I really find the most joy out of in my job.
What is the worst part?
The worst part of being a council person, man. What is the worst part of being a council person?
What's the biggest misconception?
So here's what I would say. When you're a council person, and this is something that I learned when I came on board, you're always working. And I think it's, whether we are out at a community event or we're sitting in our living room, especially with the advent of technology, right? I'll be answering emails at 10 p.m. at night, right? Or I'll be, when I go to the supermarket. And then look, it's my job, but we always, budget another half hour when I go to our local supermarket, because that folks are going to come up and talk to you. And so you're always on. And that's not a bad thing. But I think it's, unless you're in the job or you know someone who is, you might not think that. I know I didn't before I took this job, but it's something that you've got to get used to. I was a community organizer in Ohio City, and then you go from that to being a council person, and you're always on, right? Yeah. So when you get the newspaper in the morning with your cup of coffee, you can't go out in your underwear, right? you got to make sure that you've got it together. So, but no, I mean, look, Are there stressful days? Absolutely. Are there days where I want to bang my head against the wall? Absolutely. Are there days where someone, a community member will yell and be real upset, and that takes a toll on you? Absolutely.
Right.
But
yeah.
The bottom line is that when you come into these jobs, you understand the fact that you're going into public service, right? Mm-hmm. I always tell people, if I wanted to make money, I'd be doing something different, much different. It's not why you get into this job. Right. You get into this job because you care about public service. You get into this job because you care about the people in your community, and knowing that comes with everything. It's not. Here's one of the biggest misconceptions. Oh. Sometimes people think, it's all about doing TV interviews and cutting ribbons. About 95% of our job is dealing with constituent services, and that's fine, right? Mm-hmm. But that is most of what we do. Helping seniors, helping people get that pothole fixed. My water was turned off accidentally. The house next door is vacant and something needs to happen with it. Someone stole a package off my porch. Whatever those issues might be in the community, that's our day-to-day. That's really what we do. We try to make sure that we get good policy going through Cleveland that helps Cleveland become a better place. But the vast majority of what we do is those constituent services. But again, getting into this job, that's what you do. If you don't care about people, or if you don't want to roll your sleeves up and help people, this is not the job for you.
You don't want your phone going off
not
all
the job
night.
For you. Not the job for you. That's right.
Really good. And you've been an amazing council person.
Well, I appreciate that, and I know I'm far from perfect, but I wake up every morning and try to do the best I can. So,
what else do you think viewers should know about Ward 3?
Well, Ward 3 is this incredible, diverse group of passionate people. And I would say that makes my job so wonderful, in the sense that, whether it's through a community meeting, whether it's through volunteerism, whether it's through activism, whether it's that new small business that opened down the street, whether it's people passionate about new trails, whether it's people passionate about the environment or affordable housing, social justice, you name it. I will take that passion all day over apathy. And I'll tell you that sometimes, we'll come out of a tense public meeting and a resident will pull me aside and say, man, I don't know how you do it, But my response to that is, I will take a group of residents that are very passionate, maybe even yelling about an issue, all day over apathy. Because that shows me that those residents care. That shows me that they're passionate about that issue, even if they're upset about it. Yeah. It shows that they're passionate. They took the time to show up to that meeting, they took the time to express their opinion, and they took the time to really demonstrate to me and to everyone that they care. And what I love about Ward 3 is that people that live in our community care. Whether it is Diane Howard, who is one of our resident community leaders in Lakeview Estates, Alberta Howard, who's another one of our resident community leaders, who are collecting backpacks for the kids that are going back to school, or advocating on behalf of public transportation, or advocating on behalf of clean air in our community and how industry impacts our residential community. Whether it is Dan Lehman in Tremont, who is making sure that he's planting new trees in our community and partnering to ensure that we are increasing our tree canopy in our neighborhoods. I mean, whether it is people like Norma Polanco Boyd, who are starting family networks to bring families and children together in our community, whether it's people like Bonnie Walker in Stockyards, who are advocating for better parks and playgrounds, you name it throughout our community. Alan O'Connell and others in the Downtown Cleveland Residents Association, who are organizing our Downtown Cleveland residents. The best part of my job is supporting those passionate residents, and I've got so many of them in Ward 3, and that's why I love my job, and that's why we're a special community, because people care.
How can we contact you and get more information on Ward 3?
Absolutely. So everyone is always welcome to contact us on any of our forms of media, I would say. So at Kerry McCormack 1 is our Twitter. Cleveland City Councilman Kerry McCormack on Facebook. You can find 216-664-2691. 216-664-2691 is our office line. KMCCORMACK at clevelandcitycouncil.org is our email. What other ways can you get? Yell from from your window if I'm walking by.
Stop you in a grocery store.
Stop me in the grocery store. Absolutely. So those are all the ways you can get connected to us. We try to be as responsive as humanly possible. As always, if you call, please leave a message, because if we're on the other line and we miss you, we're not going to be able to find you unless you leave a message. Your name and number in that message is also appreciated, so we can give you a call back.
That's great. Thank you so much for being in studio with us. It's been a pleasure having you here. And thank you so much for tuning in to Catching Up with Council. As always, we'll have all this information for you at tv20cleveland.com. I'm Leah Longbreak. Until next time.